All right, Randy Brothers, everyone. He is here on the show. I'm really excited to have you, Randy. Randy, you're the founder of Elite Roofing out here in Denver, Colorado, not too far away from myself. I'm in Boulder. You also started the Roofing Academy, which is one of the most well-renowned roofing training programs and mentorships in the industry. Also, a author of the Start It, Build It, Grow It book, and as a side of that, a co-host of the Start, Build, Grow show. I'm really excited to have you on here. You've done a lot of really cool things, and I'm excited to have you tell a little bit about it. Tell us a little bit about your story and kind of how you learned those lessons along the way. And really excited to tie in what we kind of talk about here on the Nailed It show of scaling and growth and systems and processes and all of that fun stuff to your origins. So I want to kick it off strong by asking you, in a lot of your podcast episodes and in your book and all sorts of things, you've talked a lot about having a lot of failures early on and having to rebuild from that. So can you take us back to that time in your career and tell us a little bit more about what those failures were? How did you learn from them? And then how did you take those lessons and then apply them to grow even further?
Love it, man. Hey, thanks again for having me, George. Looking forward to be on the show. So thanks again. And congrats on getting the show up and running. And I'm grateful that you reached out to get me on here. Man, that's a long, could be a long question and a whole discussion there on the failures and whatnot. I think at its core, um, I'm a type of person that if I get my mind on something, I just want to try it and figure it out and see if it's going to work. And I'll kind of obsess over something for a little while. So as an entrepreneur early on, I got into construction and I wanted to be a builder. I wanted to build my own company. I went to school for business and learned a lot about marketing. And I wanted to learn. I wanted to figure it out. And this is back when we didn't have AI. We didn't have barely even had Google, like any sort of like, information was very limited on how to do things and how to scale and how to overcome things. So this is back trial and error. Just try something and figure it out. And if it works, double down. If it doesn't work, try something different. And that was kind of the mindset I always had. It was never so much of, hey, if you're gonna fail, stop. It was never failure was really never an option. It was more, I'm just gonna try and continue to press and learn things. And as I learned, I got better and I figured things out. But I think at its core, when I started, originally my vision, I'm in roofing now, roofing and coaching and consulting now, but originally, and that was never even on my mind. I was focused on, I wanted to build a construction company. And, I just, like we talked a little minute ago, you just really found something I really liked and enjoyed. I love construction ever since I was a little kid. I remember, watching my dad and grandpa build stuff and out in the shop or in the garage or whatever, all the tools. I just loved the idea of building stuff and creating something. And I got into, sparked an interest in home building. So I wanted to be a home builder. I wanted to learn how to do construction, wanted to learn how to build homes. And my pathway, I started my business and my pathway was to get there. I knew I needed to do some sort of project just to get going. So I started doing a lot of remodels, a lot of basement finish. And one of the big failures that I had early on was, I just dove right in and I was doing all the things, wearing all the hats. So, I had a garage full of tools. I had my own house at the time. I had a garage full of tools. I also had a basement with an office in it. And I was, trying to doing all the office work and quickly realized that there was just not enough time for one person to do it all. I couldn't be on the tools and doing the construction. I couldn't be doing the sales, the marketing, the accounting, the back office stuff. I couldn't be doing the follow-ups and all the things and project management, all of myself. I had a team of different people, different subcontractors and stuff that I used. But, that was probably the start of one of the biggest failures of mine is I just dove right in. I had a lot of skills and a lot of like ambition and I knew a lot about construction and building, but what I didn't know is how to create systems and how to systemize things and how to delegate and find people to help me with things. Plus, I didn't have the money to hire anybody. So I just I spent a couple of years literally just working nearly 6, 7 days a week and, pretty much doing all the things myself and running myself ragged, the whole working 80 hours to avoid working 40. So that was a big challenge, was, trying to figure out how to bridge that gap and switch from doing all the things myself to then, start the long process of finding and delegating and leaning on other people to help me. So that was a big lesson I learned early on, is all about, understanding what my strengths were and not necessarily, and in finding a way to delegate things that I wasn't very good at. That was hard.
Right. Right. No, that 100%. And I think I think that's true in almost every business ever, right? Is there's what I call the chasm, right? Between you're doing well and but you're doing it all yourself, right? You guys are successful, you're making money, but you got everything riding on your shoulders. And then there's that chasm that you have to cross, where you have to reallocate some of that time, reallocate some of that money, some of those resources to saying, okay, to be able to get to the next level, I have to be able to take all of this weight off my shoulders and move it to somebody else's shoulders or a multitude of other people's shoulders, so that we can continue up that upwards graph. And I think that moment in time in business really tells a lot about who you are as a person as well. And also it kind of gives you an insight of what your goals are, right? Like if you're okay with running your own thing, doing a lot of it yourself, keeping everyone in check, not really having to, manage 46 different people and do all these things and have all this team and all of that, and you're making good money and you're happy with that, fine. Like you don't have to scale the way that we're talking about, but for those owners and for those people who want to build something more than just, you know, a, for lack of a better word, it's your own job, right? For those people who want to build something like an empire that can actually scale without you, I mean, that's a huge, huge, huge problem. And I think especially in construction and home service, it's a very labor intensive business, right? It's extremely human capital based. And so you have to be really good at leadership and putting together teams. And I think that's one thing that you talk a lot about in your book and also in your podcast, of like teams and putting people together is one of, if not the way to cross that chasm, right? And so when you thinking back to when you were crossing that chasm, I mean, how did you said there was a lot of trial and error, but what was kind of that tick moment where you're like, oh, okay, this is how it works, and then you kind of just went from there?
Well, I don't know if there is one specific moment, but it kind of all culminated at one time, if that makes sense. For me, I was doing all the things, and then the problem was when you're in the trenches, okay, when you're starting a business, when you're trying to build a business, and your head is down, you're just in the trenches, just solving whatever problem is and trying to put out whatever fire it is that day. I was in that place for years, and it didn't give me the opportunity to actually take a step back to look at the market, to look at the industry, to look at how the consumer behavior was changing, the market behavior was changing, and young guy didn't realize it, didn't know what I didn't know, but I was just so in the weeds, just trying to get through each day, that I wasn't paying attention to the market. And all the while, the market was having a massive shift. And this was right during the time where there was a big, for those of us old dogs in the business, remember the first recession that happened, started in maybe 2006, 2007, and went all the way through 2008 and 9. And that the bank stopped lending. At the time, I was trying to build a construction company, and at one point in time, that the county that I was working in had the highest foreclosure rate in the country, and I wasn't paying attention to that. These are all signs that an experienced entrepreneur would be paying attention to. Nowadays, I'm all about looking at the markets and letting the market dictate what moves I make as I'm adjusting my business models. But at that point, it was just survival mode of just getting through each day. And all the while, the market was shifting. Okay, people weren't buying homes anymore. The home building was slowing down and almost coming to a complete halt. And my model of my business, what the most of the business I was getting was from homeowners that were getting home equity lines of credit to then refinish their basements, because a lot of homes got built, but a lot of basements didn't. So I was like, I'll fill that niche, right? I'll be the basement guy. And I started doing a lot of basement finish. And the market was shifting, and the interest rates, and then all of a sudden the whole bottom dropped out. And then like pretty much overnight, nobody was able to get funding anymore. They weren't doing construction. No new homes were being built, and it all shifted like overnight. So I was kind of forced into that moment, as you asked, is like that was the moment. I was like, oh no, my business as I knew it was pretty much overnight done. So then I had to go back to the drawing board and figure out what to do to survive. And at that point, I looked at and I thought about, okay, what are the things, the skills that I have? Who do I know? Okay, you asked the people question. First question, who do I know? And this one's so valuable because a lot of people go at it, they start things on their own, but they don't realize that every single person you meet, every single person you come and connect in contact with, that you're able to have an opportunity to establish a relationship with is vitally important. And looking back at my entire career, asking myself that question, who do I know? I started leaning on different people I knew that were successful in the industry. Maybe they had different types of construction companies. And ultimately, I landed myself in a fire and water restoration company. So I got a job for a little while as a superintendent. I knew construction really well. I knew people that got me connected to this company, and I landed myself a job doing fire and water restoration. So I learned all that. Learned quickly that was, working for somebody else was definitely not the ultimate goal. However, through that process, I learned the insurance world. I learned about supplementing. I learned about, the restoration of rebuilds of things and after disasters happen. And through that, I got connected, started getting connected to the first people I met that were doing roofing sales, got into the roofing. They partnered up with this restoration company when a tornado happened and a big hailstorm happened. And so all these things like started kind of falling in line. I'm just learning and observing. So that was a big turning point. Is I lost everything. And then I started asking myself the question, who do I know and who can I lean on and how can I learn the things I need to learn to then recoup and get better and fix the mistakes I had made of not paying attention. So I started paying attention. People was vitally important early on. And then I ended up getting into fire and water restoration for a little while, but that's what opened the door to learn insurance. And then I ended up becoming an insurance adjuster. So at the time I was broke. I was upside down in debt and didn't know what to do to get myself out of it. So I saw that pathway out was if I were to travel and become an insurance adjuster, then I could maybe make some money and make enough money quickly to get myself out of debt, then get back on track with building my business. So that was a key turning point, is like going to an absolute low of losing everything. I found myself at one point living out of my truck. I didn't have a house. I moved to Texas to get my license as an adjuster. And then when I left Texas to come back to Colorado, I had no home. I was homeless and I was bankrupt and just at the total bottom. But I never looked at it as if I was failing. I just looked at it, there was definitely pretty depressive moments or down moments in that, in that time. But I always found a way to, have faith and found a way to find the next person that I can connect with and ask the right questions to then get the information I needed to make my next move. And it's just one move at a time and one person, one human at a time that I got connected with and I learned from, and that helped me understand the opportunities that actually were there when on my own I kind of wasn't paying attention to the opportunities and they kind of hit me the wrong way. But again, it circles back to people. Who do you know? That was the biggest question I asked. And that's what ultimately circled me back to connect with the right people who ultimately led me to finding my way into the roofing business.
Mm-hmm. And for those who aren't familiar, can you tell us a little bit more kind of what happened after that? I mean, you went into the roofing business, you learned all this stuff from all these great people. How did you then go from that into the elite roofing that we know today?
So I ended up getting a job with a company on my, like literally I'm in Texas, getting ready to come back, wanting to come back to Colorado. I was kind of at the lowest point of my life personally. And I got an opportunity. Again, I knew somebody from college, a friend of mine who got me connected with a guy that was like, hey, they had a big hailstorm here and they were scaling up and they needed sales reps and I didn't know any different. So I'm like, sure, I'll go do that. I got nothing else to lose. So I got a job as a sales rep for a company and that company scaled like crazy. They had a big storm and that company scaled like crazy overnight. And it was, I learned a lot from being involved in that environment to see, going from a handful of sales reps to I think that 50 or 60 sales reps in a matter of a couple of months. They were just hiring anybody and everybody. And they made a ton of mistakes. I mean, there's a lot to learn. They made a ton of mistakes. They're still, a really big company to this day. They've learned from their mistakes and gotten better. But, you know, seeing and experiencing that, um, showed me that one, it was possible, but two, it gave me a lot of thoughts on like how I would do it differently and what are some things that I could do, to do, to make different moves or to kind of, create a different environment that I thought, in my opinion, would have been a better, environment for all the people involved. Maybe not scaling as fast and really focusing on a few different things like our core values and a few different things that I thought like if we were very systemized and we had a structured system for everything early on, then maybe we can set ourselves up for scale and that sort of things. Whereas this company just scaled with no systems and it was a mess for a long time. So that's what triggered the idea of, you know what, I did that for a little while, a little over a year, worked for them, traveled, did some storm chasing, and they supported me. And it wasn't a bad environment. I mean, for me, it wasn't a terrible environment. I got a lot of support, made some money. But I always had this in the back of my mind, like, can I do this better? Can I do this different way? And one day I just decided, I'm going to regret not trying and not betting on myself for the rest of my life if I don't do it. And that was a conversation I had with that owner. It was like, I'm going to regret not doing this. I have to try. And that's what ultimately led to starting my own thing. So I had my company, the construction company, kind of let it go dormant for a little while, if you will. And then when I went and learned all this stuff and did all these things for a couple of years, and then I came back and I just relaunched with the Elite Roofing brand from the absolute ground up. I was broke, had to borrow some money from some people. Again, I knew people. I asked, who do I know? I connected with some people. I was able to convince them to invest in my idea, invest in my company. At the time, my mom was already helping me doing I saw a lot of success doing roofing sales, to where I was so busy with paperwork from doing roofing sales that I needed her to help me as my assistant. So she was already familiar with the process and a lot of things. And I knew she was really good with money and she was really good with like details and systems. So I was like, hey, why not just see if she can help me and we'll just get this little roofing company started. With a big vision. And that's ultimately how we started. I was sitting in a hotel in Ohio, working for this other company, working a storm, knocking some doors, like just getting set up in the storm. And I see on the news that Aurora back in Colorado had baseball sized hail. I'm like, man, if ever I'm going to do this, now is the time. They just had a storm. Now is the time to do it. Turns out that storm was actually not that great, but it was enough for me to really get that push that I needed to just jump off the deep end, put all my chips in the table and bet on myself and start the business. So that's what ultimately led me to do that.
That's awesome. That's awesome. When you got to that point of starting the Elite Roofing brand now, second attempt at the business world, right? What kind of systems and processes did you take from what you had learned from all those people and also kind of what you learned from the roofing sales side of things? What sort of systems and processes and just maybe mindsets, certain things you learned in that phase of your life that you then applied to Elite to say, okay, this is how I'm going to do it differently this time. And this is what I'm going to focus on instead.
Well, one of the things, and I teach this to a lot of anybody I work with in mentorship and coaching consulting, is like, don't underestimate the value of rebuilding the foundation and setting a great foundation. And what I mean by that is vision, values, and brand.
Yeah.
So early on, I just realized, through mentorship and people that I had leaned on, that if I wanted to do this right, I had to start with a really good foundation. Yeah. So we were really intentional about like creating a vision, figuring out like what we wanted to be, who we were as a company, what our core values were, what our mission was, and kind of starting with a lot of that. It wasn't fine tuned. We just had the ideas early on, but starting with that and then being able to leverage my relationships to then get salespeople real quick. I built a sales team right away. I found started doing service repairs right away. I had a good admin with my mom and my sister came on board like right away. I started all that stuff quickly, and it wasn't so much me creating the systems. It was me knowing the value and the importance of those systems. So I found people to help me that were better at creating systems than I was naturally. Yeah. I was a sales rep. I was a sales leader. My job was to go make it right. My job was to go sell deals, find people to help me sell deals as quickly as possible, while also giving autonomy to those people around me to then implement and build the systems behind me. So they naturally started documenting pretty much everything that we were doing. If mom had to do something multiple times, in our market, pulling permits and all that stuff, licensing, I mean, it's a lot different than a lot of other markets where you can't just order materials and show up. You got to pull a permit and have inspections and mid roofs and post ladders. And there's a lot of like nuances and details that go into that. So she learned quickly that like, hey, if I have to do this thing over and over, and all the markets are different, she started building spreadsheets and building standard procedures and writing things down and creating checklists, and that has developed into like this massive library that we actually now share with all of our members of every single process in the business is now documented in videos, and there's SOPs and agreements and everything you could possibly imagine for it. But early on, it was just documenting processes and rinse and repeat. And that was early. So they were able to do that, and kind of like, I wasn't intentional with it. I just knew I had some good people with me, and I gave them the flexibility to use their strengths to their best ability. And they did. And we got off the ground. We scaled pretty quickly. We jumped off the ground pretty quickly. And I think a lot of it had to do with just throwing people at it. Like for me, I was just out hustling, recruiting, and trying to bring on as many people as I can. Ultimately, very few of them actually stuck with the company. But I was able to it was a numbers game at that point. It was just hustle, and go sell and find other people to try to go sell while we're trying to build this brand. But one thing I will share that's was a massive turning point for us. We grew, we got to 2-3 million the first couple of years. And then we thought we were, invincible. And we were like, we're going to scale this thing. And we went to another market, and then ended up going down by a third of our revenue because we were spread ourselves so thin. But that forced me to really step back and look at the business from a different perspective and figure out what was broken and what was not scalable. You talk about scale in this a lot, right? And I figured out that the way we were approaching our sales was not scalable, because I was relying on just, without a written system, training people and bringing on people that already had experience, and they had all these different habits, and nobody had any cohesion as to like who's doing what. There wasn't a step-by-step process. So that's when I really started leaning in on, different sales programs out there. And we spent a bunch of money and time and energy and training. And ultimately we landed by building our own sales system, a 7-step process that we follow. We documented it. Now to this day, it's multiplied all over the country and people use it all the time. But, that was the key, is like create a system to where I can hire, train, and maintain sales reps. And once I was able to do that, it opened a lot more doors. So that was a massive kind of crux and turning point for us, that once we did that and implemented that, the very next year, we tripled our business.
Wow. Impressive. Do you think that that's one mistake that a lot of people make when they're trying to scale from 7 to 8 figures, or just maybe even high 7 figures, is thinking that what got them to 7 is going to be the same things that gets them to 8?
Yeah. I mean, there's a massive difference between, your $3, $4, $5 million company and your $10 million company.
Yeah.
And a lot of us tend to think, and I know I'm going to counteract myself a little bit here, because a lot of us think that like, well, sales cures all, right? All we got to do is just double down sales. And obviously sales are vitally important. You can't scale without selling, without having a sales system. But make sure you have a system. You got to have sales leaders. You got to have a sales training program, the ability to hire, recruit, and bring on sales reps that are outside the industry and teach them how to do things your way. All those things are vitally important, and they're challenging to do. And we, along with a number of other people out there, can help you implement that. But if you don't have your back office built in a way that you can handle that scale, you're not going to be sustainable. Okay. So everybody tends to throw the word scale around in our business, right? Scale. But I've learned in my 2 decades of doing this now, it's not about scale. It's about sustainability. Like, build something that not only when you get to that point, when you get to that 8 figures, are you going to continue to scale? Great, if that's what you're trying to focus on. Or are you going to try to maintain that and then focus on building that bottom line, which is more my preference. But you have to have duplicatable back office. You have to have your finances in order. You have to have your cash flow management in order. You have to have your production systems in order. You have to have your technology, which is vitally important nowadays. Technology, all your systems talking to each other, your CRM systems, using AI, like everybody, you got to be using all these things. So you got to have your back office in order to not only scale, but sustain that scalability. But the number one most important thing that we tend to forget, especially young entrepreneurs that are just looking at revenue numbers go up, is profitability.
Yeah.
Okay. And what I see all too often is when companies scale their revenue, they actually increase their overhead at a higher percentage rate than their revenue. And they're measuring just off revenue. And what you run into is this, what we call diminishing returns. Whereas when your costs are going up at a higher rate than your revenue, and you're not growing your profitability, you're actually shrinking your profitability as you're scaling your business. And that's a massive mistake that a lot of companies make.
Yeah. I see that all the time where people think that just because you make more money, you have to spend more, which is true in relativity to your revenue, but it's not, you don't have to spend more in, like you said, in a ratio to where it actually starts shrinking your profitability. Like, of course, there are times when reinvesting is important, and there might be a time where you need to shrink profitability to get to the next level, whatever it might be. But I see that all the time, and not only in the roofing industry, but also in our industry, right? Like, people think that, you get to a certain level and all of a sudden you have to have terrible margins because that's just how it happens. Like, no, it's not the case. So when you started to see that, or when that became apparent to you, how did you make sure that you were maintaining that profitability? Is there a few things that you put into place?
Well, first off, I didn't. I learned from mistakes.
Right?
It's
Trial and error.
Scaled our business, and I got to the point where, I figured out another process that you've got to have dialed in is your hiring and onboarding process. You got to be able to, hire, onboard, train. You got to create roles and responsibilities for every single person in the business, and then you got to be able to train every single role in the business. And as for those of you who want more information on that, feel free to reach out, because we've done that. We've created this entire module, an entire program, to where we now have the ability to help you hire, train, and maintain every role in a roofing business. But you got to have that ability to do that primarily. But when it comes to, focusing on cash flow and profitability, you got to be focused on growing. And well, I guess I digress, because the mistake I made as we scaled and grew our business was I just kept throwing people at problems. We're growing our business, market opportunities there, we're scaling. It's like, well, here's a problem, or here's an issue in the business. Cool, let's just hire somebody to solve that and do that and fill that gap. Okay, cool. We did that. And then next thing you know, I have a large staff and then a large overhead. And then at that point, I have to maintain a certain level of growth and a certain level of revenue just to survive. So I made the mistake of overbuilding my company without enough of a focus on the bottom line. And then as soon as again, we'll circle back to the market shift. If you're in a hail world and you don't get hail, things change rapidly in your business. So I made the mistake of having way too much overhead and not enough revenue. And when the revenue started dying off, or the market shifted, we didn't get hailstorms, and COVID hit, and those sort of things that you definitely can't plan for. I was really top heavy. So then I had to go back to the drawing board and rebuild and restructure the entire company. So overbuilding from a personnel perspective, that's what was a big mistake that I made.
For sure.
It killed our profit.
Yeah, I can imagine. Then payroll taxes ain't cheap.
Yeah.
When you ended up developing the program and also the book, what gave you the idea that that's something that you wanted to do? Kind of what point in your life were you at where you said, this is something that I want to delegate some of my time towards?
Ultimately, it came down to gratitude. Through all the challenges that I had been through, when I finally kind of figured things out and really start to see this profitable, scalable, model that's also sustainable, and I really start to see some growth and success in our business. When you start seeing some success, people start to reach out, and you start getting these, a lot more opportunities. And, I started getting opportunities to speak at events and share my story, interviews and podcasts. And this is early on, before not everybody had a podcast now, but
Right.
And I really, through that process, I really, realized how just eternally grateful I was for this industry.
Mm.
Uh, if it weren't for the roofing industry, I don't know where I would be, right? So I was able
Yeah.
to, to build something really special and create a life for myself and my family and my loved ones. It was all because of the roofing industry. And I
Mm.
felt like a calling to share and to give back to that industry that just gave me such a blessed life, right? And at the
Yeah.
same time, unfortunately, with good comes bad, and you see a lot of, people that we won't talk specifically about, but there's a lot of people that come and go or that come in the industry and that do things, in my opinion, the wrong way with the wrong character, the wrong attitude, and kind of, you know, creating this kind of mess and creating a black eye for our industry, if you will. I felt like, somebody needed to step up and try to do this the right way, in my opinion. And as I realized that we had seen a lot of success in a model, and I remember distinctly early on in my career looking around, for any sort of business book for construction, and didn't exist.
Yeah.
So I decided when I finally figured some things out and created a model, got over the $10 million mark, and was able to sustain that. That's when I was like, you know what? Let me write a book. I had the opportunity again, people I knew. I had the opportunity to connect with a group that was able to help me write it, and get it published and all that. And then at that point, that's when the trend started happening of online courses. So then I was like, well, maybe I can take this book and create an online course and provide value to come. I was always in the back of my mind. I'm always like trying to solve problems for the old version of me, if that makes sense. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
how do I help the young Randy brothers when he was just getting started, the young ambitious guy that didn't know anything? How do I help that guy do better and grow faster, right? So
Right.
the book led to the online course, which led to people really leaning and liking one-on-one coaching, to which led to building an entire business model where I have, a team of coaches, 7 of us now. So, an entire team of coaches, and our model is one-on-one. We have the online course, we have all the documents and everything, all the SOPs you can possibly imagine documented and helping you build and implement your business. But at the end of the day, having someone to, hold you accountable and walk you through step by step how to build and implement these things in your business, people saw a lot of value in that. So we leaned into that. And that's why we built a whole program that's dedicated to helping, entrepreneurs from inception all the way up to if they're looking to scale and looking to exit their business. We have full high level C-suite fractional CFO services. So I could take a company from inception all the way to, well north of $10 million. And if they're going to try to sell it. So we built a model that can help service all of that. And at the end of the day, it's all because of gratitude. I'm grateful that I've been able to do this in my own business and my own life. And I'm really passionate and like convicted that, it's my duty to give back to the industry and to help good people succeed.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love that. I hear that from a lot of the more successful teachers and mentors in a lot of different industries, that they really started by trying to solve a problem for the old version of themselves. Like, well, I struggled with this. I know other people got to struggle with it too. So how can I help all these other people with the same problem that I had? Um, Along those lines, I feel like this question gets asked to a lot of different people, and there's a lot of different answers to it. But with how the roofing and construction and overall just economic world is today, although we have a million and one resources that people can turn to, like with what you guys have, and a bajillion other ones to how to start a company, how to run it properly, how to do XYZ. Do you think it's easier now or when you started to get into roofing?
Oh, it's 1,000 times easier now.
Okay.
To get
Interesting.
started. Yeah. I mean, you can chat GPT how to start a roofing company, get an entire business model written for you.
Right.
They didn't have that. I had to write that myself, and
Right.
break it and fix it a whole bunch of times. So it's easy to now. The startup is easy.
Right.
But there's other challenges, and I think the number one challenge that AI and technology and systems is not going to fix, and that's leadership and character,
Mm.
and charisma,
Yeah.
right? It's like if you're going to do this, the thing that if there's a piece of advice I can give to any young entrepreneur out there wanting to grow and scale their business is, you know, you can never spend enough time on yourself.
Mm.
And I think the great ones, some of the best people I know, the best entrepreneurs, best mentors, people I look up to, people I've seen grow and scale great businesses, the one thing they all have in common is they all have a very intentional commitment to growing as leaders themselves and being the best leader they can be, because at the end of the day, you can have all the tools and all the tech and all the AI in the world, but if you're not focused on being the best leader you can be each and every day and growing as a leader each and every day, good luck. That's the key. That AI can't replace that. That commitment to growing as a leader, I think that's the difference.
I think it's an unfortunate trend that we see in a lot of areas of construction where kind of the rise and grind, beat yourself to the ground, nose to the grindstone, just get it done type of mentality is very much so still alive in the construction industry. And don't get me wrong, there definitely is a time and a place for that type of ethic, right? Like you definitely need to have that in certain areas, right? There's seasons for everything. But I think what you had just said, you can never spend enough time on yourself. I think that goes not only with developing your skills, right, your ability, but also making sure that you as an operator are taken care of so that you can then take care of your people and your business, right? And I think, unfortunately, that's something that a lot of people miss out on because they're stuck in this mindset, this grind set, I call it, right? Of I just have to go. And eventually, I can outwork all of these problems. When in some cases, sure, that's true. But I think, especially now with how you said, especially here in Colorado, because things, like you said, seasons change and there can be ups and downs and a bajillion things happening at once. But I think in general, with just how our world is today, with how quickly technology moves, with how quickly markets change, and a variety of variables playing into your success, I think it is extremely important to take care of yourself and figure out what makes you tick, right? What makes you as a person want to get up in the morning and really put your all into growing whatever you're growing, right? And I just wanted to mention that because I think it goes along the lines of what you just said, but I think so many people miss that point, right? And that's also something you can't really teach a lot of people, right? That's something you kind of have to learn. It's one of those unteachable moments where you can hear it a million times and be, oh yeah, I get that. I know. But until you actually go through that moment of life where you're like, man, I gotta, take care of myself a little bit better. It's hard to really grasp the importance of it. Would you agree?
Oh, very much. We were talking about is your why.
Yeah.
It's and that's a exercise. It's a great book Simon Sinek wrote, Start with Why. That one was very impactful to me early on. But if you don't know your why, like if you don't know your true deep core why, like why you do what you do, it's really easy to just, and you're absolutely right. There's a rite of passage that I feel like every entrepreneur, and I would share this, especially because the next generation coming up, the next generation coming up is they've been around tech and been around fast pace and everything's easy now. You press a button, you prompt the right thing and it does it for you. Like we have this mentality, but there's still a rite of passage of just grinding and doing the work and being in the trenches that I feel like every great entrepreneur still needs to be able to have. But the problem is you can have that mentality, but you got to have that mentality with a vision to get out of it, to learn what you need to know, to then pass it on to the right person and rinse and repeat that, right? But what happens is those who, are still in that mindset of just, I can outwork everyone. I was totally that person. I was like, I'm not the smartest person out here. I'm not the greatest at this, that, and the other. Definitely not the sharpest tool in the shed, but I know I can work and I can outwork everybody. I'll outwork my competition. And that's a great mindset early on. But I had to learn that it wasn't about outworking everybody. It was about learning enough to be dangerous and then passing it on to someone who can do it better than me.
Right. Out leveraging people instead of outworking.
And rinse and repeat and rinse and repeat. And then all of a sudden you still have that work ethic and that mentality. Like I'm willing to do the work and put in the grind, but the grind itself changes.
Yeah.
Okay. If you're spending 80% of your time doing things that other people should be doing or could be doing in your business, you're not growing your business. But if you're spending 80% of your time doing the things that only the visionary and only the leader can do, you grow at a much faster pace. In order to do that, you've got to have people around you to do
Yeah.
the things that you know you could do, but that can do it just as good, if not better than you.
Right.
And that's the grind. The grind stays. Like I'm a big advocate that anybody I work with, the question I ask, I want to make sure we're on the same page is like, I don't do it for the money. I don't do it for certain X dollars. I don't care if I have $100 million company. None of that matters to me. I want freedom. I want the financial freedom to do what I want, when I want, however I want to do it. I happen to love working. I happen to love building businesses. I happen to love coaching people and building people and leading people. So
Yeah.
I love going to work. I want to go to work. I want to do the things to build my business. So that grind is still there, but I also love freedom. I
Right.
want to do what I want. I want to travel multiple times a year. I want to be able to take my family on vacations. I want to be able to play golf. I want to be able to play pickleball. I want to travel and go out for a walk in the middle of the day, do the things that I want to do to nurture my own spirit and my own soul. And in order to
Right.
do that, I still have that grind. But in order to do that, I have to get past my own insecurities, but I also have to like not hold myself back as a leader. And a lot of
Yeah.
companies, a lot of owners do that. They hold themselves back because they're too afraid to let someone else take the reins or let someone else make an actual decision that would impact the output of the company. Right. So, in order to, so freedom, at the end of the day, it's all about freedom. I'm chasing freedom. I'm helping contractors find freedom. And if you're on that same page, if freedom is the ultimate goal, awesome, let's talk, because that I want to surround myself with as many people as possible that have that same goal and help as many people achieve that, because it is a really, really cool place to be. It's a
Mm.
great place to operate day in and day out. And I love it. I'm grateful for it. And I want to help as many other people experience it as possible.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a quote by Alex Hormozy that I love that's along those lines, which is, I'll do whatever it takes to have to do nothing at all. And
Yeah.
it's a motto that I live by too, where I'm very young. I'm only 21 years old. And so I'm in that stage of my life where it's like, I'm trying to do whatever it takes so that 10, 15 years from now, I don't got to do anything at all if I don't want to. And I think that that's a great place to be. Like you said, it's a great goal to work towards, but it's also more fulfilling because once you get to I something that I hear over and over and over again is the numbers only matter until you have them. And then once you have the numbers, you realize that they didn't matter at all because nothing changed, right? Like you as a person and how you are, nothing really changed. You're like, well, I still feel the same. But
Yeah.
freedom and flexibility is really what gives you that a bit that feeling of relief, that feeling of choice, that feeling of, oh wow, I really can just kind of do whatever I want. And it's not the numbers, it's the way that you set your life up. And so I love that. And I love that that's something that you guys preach inside the academy as well, and not just, something that you talk about. Um, from inside the academy, I mean, you've been doing this for a while and you've worked with a ton of roofing companies and owners. What's a pattern that you see that separates the top 5% of contractors and business owners from everybody else?
Well, I got to kind of reiterate, it's a commitment to growing as a leader.
Mm.
Leadership, hands down. I mean,
Yeah.
those that are the upper echelon that really have a big impact and really grow and scale their business, they are humble enough to know what they don't know, and they're also they also have the ability to, allow others to, really come in and do the things that they know they're not good at doing. And those companies that 5%, the 1%, the companies that really see the most success are the ones that get out of their own way and they find and they put really good people around them, and they focus on growing and being really, really good leaders that also grow and develop other people into good leaders. And it just creates this like trickle down effect where you have leader and then a leader and a leader and a leader. Like you build this whole company with a leadership and growth and autonomy and success mindset. Then all of a sudden you see these really cool companies start to evolve.
Yeah.
So it all
Yeah.
comes down to
No, that's
leadership, man.
awesome. That's awesome. And I would agree. I think it's just it's a people business, right? And so if you yourself learn how to grow and develop people, it becomes easy from there, right? Um,
Yeah.
from an operational standpoint, and kind of from your vantage point and your experience, what are some of the biggest operational bottlenecks you still see in a lot of roofing companies?
Um, the number one that's always been in place is the handoff between sales and production.
Mm.
From like, if you want to get into the weeds of it, like the information transfer from what is sold and talked about on the front end to the consumer,
Yeah.
the information trickled back into the production department, the person coordinating, ordering materials and setting up, invoicing, all the things they got to set up on the back end. That communication breakdown is the biggest operational challenge that I see companies struggle with. And, the question I like to always ask somebody when I'm interviewing them, or maybe determining whether we're going to work together, or if I'm in front of the stage talking to people, is, look at where your business is right now. Look at how many roofs you're doing right now, maybe per day or per week or whatever, and ask yourself this question: if I were to 5x the number of roofs I'm doing, what would break?
Yeah.
And a lot of people like have a really hard time with it, swallowing, like, oh my God, everything would break, or my whole business would break down, or like nothing would work. And if you can master the handoff of information, you can scale your business. So if I can implement a sales system where they follow the same system, rinse and repeat, and sign the deal and gather all the information they need, and they can turn over that information in a pre-built step-by-step process called a handoff process, like the sales job submission process in our business is when a sales rep turns a job in, that production person or the person coordinating or the manager, whoever's doing that, has to be able to take that job and completely fulfill that job without having to fill in gaps, without having to track down information from the sales rep. If you can master that one single thing, the sky's the limit on your scalability of your business. And most companies really, really, really struggle there because you got human elements, you got a technology elements, there's a lot of variables and a lot of us, quite frankly, are just too nice. And we're like, well, we'll just do it for them, or we'll fill in well, they didn't give me the color of drip edge on this particular job, so I'll just fill it in and figure it out. No, turn the job back to the sales rep and say, no, I'm not building this until you give me all of the information I need to build the job properly. You set a tone of expectations there, and pretty soon your sales reps start figuring it out. They go, I got to turn the job in with all the information needed, and then I can just go sell, and then they can produce for me, and they can scale, right? You can do it, and that's probably the biggest operational challenge that a lot of companies, if they get right, they can set themselves up for scalability.
Right. You don't need the sales rep sitting on the job site pointing at things and saying, no, you need to do this. They said to do this. That needs to be handled well before that.
Well, it's the logistics. I mean, it's the ordering of materials, verifying the materials, scheduling the crews, setting up, are you doing supplementing, setting up any information needed for that? If it's a retail job, you got to be able to invoice properly and invoice on time and know exactly what was sold and what needs to be invoiced, and have all these back end systems in place to where it's just it's like an assembly line. You got to think of building roofs is like, go to Henry Ford, right? Go back to the days of Ford, like build this assembly line, turn the job in, it goes down this workflow through this pipeline. And you need to be able to do that and do it at a level of scale. In order to do that, you've got to have every step of the process really dialed in with a standard procedure that everybody understands what their requirement is to get it to that next stage. And then you can kind of scale a business from there.
Yeah, 100%. How do you see AI and technology and automation playing a role in solving these bottlenecks now and in the future?
Well, I mean, AI/automations are massive because you can cover up a lot of human error by having information transferred back to your consumer on a regular basis. That way, it's always going to be there. So that's huge, right? Having those automations and being able to, like, every time a job moves to a certain bucket or a certain step along this workflow journey, you can set it up to where that automatic communication happens. And that's just massive, right? Because at the end of the day, the companies that really separate themselves are ones that have a really, really good, deep understanding and execution of the customer experience.
Yeah, 100%.
Because if you look at it from that perspective, and I'm obsessive about this, from a coaching company to I'm always, everything we build is based off of what is that experience? Can I over deliver on the expectations of what my consumer is having, right? If I
Yeah.
can over deliver as a business coach, a business consultant, they're going to stick around for a long time. They're going to have a ton of success, and we're going to have a great long-term relationship. If I can over deliver on that experience with my consumer, my clients with roofing, they're going to call me back. They're going to tell their neighbors about me. They're going to refer us, right? So
Yeah.
that's my obsession with my whole, everything we do is like create an experience that's so good that I create customers for life. And I think that's the mentality that we have to have in making every decision that we make in building our business. And
Hmm.
AI can help bridge a lot of those gaps.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I think, I mean, all the way from the first contact, right? Of they're just initially reaching out to you, all the way to, like you said, job completed and even post job. How do you communicate with the client post job? What does that look like, right? If there's this huge range of client experience that you have to make sure is dialed in at every single stage of the process, right? That at Nail, we focus on the front end, right? How do we make sure that client experience is automated and systematized before they even get to a salesperson, right? Before they even get on the schedule. And a lot of it times it's called speed to lead, right? And it's something
Yep.
that a lot of people in the industry still struggle with, surprising enough to me, right? But a lot of people do. How big of a problem do you think that is to businesses today, dealing with that speed to lead, making sure that you're contacting your potential clients as soon as possible, making sure that you're getting their information properly, and handling that part of the whole process efficiently before they even end up on the schedule?
Millions of dollars, even for a small company. Like that's how big of an issue it is, or big of an opportunity it is, because every single contact, every single moment that you get to interact with a potential customer is a moment you can set the tone for that experience that we just talked about.
Yeah.
So if you don't do it fast enough, if you don't do it efficient enough, if you don't do it the right way, you better believe somebody else is, and you're going to lose that customer.
Hmm.
Right. So if you're not like obsessive about the front end and the front end experience the tone that you set up front before you ever even get a chance to work for this customer, you're missing the boat, because this is competitive. I mean, it's getting more and more and more competitive.
Yeah.
Right. The faster AI moves, the faster technology moves, the faster, people learn and grow and get better, and the more competitive the environment gets on any industry, you better be out in front of it, or else you're going to fall behind, and people are going to run out in front of you, and they're going to beat you.
Yeah, 100%. Um, as a leader, as you talk about leading a lot, how do you personally, as a leader, stay sharp and stay out front to make sure that you're kind of ahead of the game?
Listen, and I suck at listening. First off, let me promise that. Like naturally, that's my wife and kids. Like that's a good, not a good. But at the end of the day, like listen to your people.
Yeah.
I spend the majority of my working time, if I'm not working on a specific project or solving problems or doing my quote unquote visionary type stuff, I'm coaching. And coaching is about listening. If I'm coaching customers or clients, I'm listening, asking them questions and listening to their feedback and helping them get to resolutions to help them grow and get better and solve whatever challenge it is that they need to challenge. But applying that directly to my employees and my staff and my coaching team and my sales team, and being able to be very intentional about sitting down and asking their feedback and asking them intentional questions and listening to what they have to say, that helps me grow as a leader and stay sharp as a leader. It helps me identify my own blind spots, my own challenges. It helps me create ways to where I can solve challenges and help make it a better environment for my staff as well. Because one, I just talked about being obsessive about your client experience, but you also need to be obsessive about your employees' experience, your sales experience, everyone who works with you, everyone who interacts with you, that needs to be a good experience as well. So,
it's
as a
very
leader,
similar.
it's very similar, very, very closely tied.
Yeah.
So I try to do the best I can, listening and adjusting and always getting better. But that's just the human side of leadership. But the other side of it is I'm a lifelong learner, right? I'm committed to learning and growing every single day. If you see my taglines on my emails and stuff, it's learn and grow every day. And I live by that, because, if I'm not listening to podcasts, if I'm not reading books, if I'm not, paying attention to the market and learning from others. I mean, I learned from my 10-year-old son. Like there's always something you can learn from somebody, right? So,
Yeah.
so everybody you get a chance to interact with, there's an opportunity to learn something from them. And if you go into every interaction and every relationship from a perspective of, not only what can I learn from this person, but how can I pour into this person, it creates a really good dynamic where you're constantly staying sharp and getting better and getting better. And it's like, and just know that the journey itself, that's the destination. You're never going to get there. You're never going to be the perfect leader. You're never going to be the best at what you do. Like, you're never going to be that quote unquote ideal thing or person or whatever it is you're trying to be. Like, just be committed to growing and getting better. Right. So I'm a great, awesome. So I'm a golfer. I'll give you this analogy as we start to wrap here, but I'll give the analogy, like, I like golf, right? And I've been shitty at golf my whole life, right? I don't know how many people raise your hand, you play golf forever and you're still not that good at it, right? And I'm getting better. But like, every time I meet somebody that's really good, like a plus handicap or somebody that's like really good at golf, I always ask them, what is the thing that helped you get better? And one thing that somebody said to me recently is a really good golfer. And he also, he's a leader at the men's group in my church, and he's just become a good mentor and a good friend of mine. And he said, you got to be like fully engaged to the process. Like, you got to fall in love with the process. And he's like, there's times where you're going to go to the range over and over and over and hit the same shots and have the same issues, the same mistakes, and not see much growth. But it's that commitment to showing up and being committed to that process. That's the difference, is the love the process and love the commitment. And eventually you're going to see growth. You're going to go from, the 15 to the 12 to the 10 to the 9. You'll work your way down in the handicap. And that was, it was pretty profound to me. Like, as someone who's a really, really good golfer, he's like, you just got to, like, the outcome isn't the goal. Like, the hitting the great round is not the goal. Like, showing up and doing the work is the actual goal.
Yeah. Awesome. I love that. One thing that we like to do here as a wrap up tradition on the podcast is 3 rapid fire questions that are really impactful and punchy. So first and foremost, rapid fire question. What is the worst business advice you hear all the time?
More is better. More is not better. Better is better.
Put that as your next Instagram caption. Second one, if you could only track one KPI for the rest of the year, I guess it's November, but let's say next year, what would that be and why?
Oh man, one KPI. I would probably say lead efficiency. Converting an opportunity to an actual presentation is vitally important for me. Just making sure that we're capturing every single opportunity possible.
Love that. And then final one, arguably best one. Where can people go to learn more about you, the program, the book, etc.?
All the medias of social. I'm on all of it. I interact probably the most on Facebook Messenger if you want to reach out to me. But the best thing to learn all about what we do, just go to YouTube. The Roofing Academy on YouTube. We have a ton of content. I've had 300 plus episodes of my podcast, plus a bunch of clips and a bunch of things. And you can links to our website. But I would encourage and ask, hey, if you enjoy this, I would love for you to check out our podcast, The Start Build Grow Show. Go to YouTube, The Roofing Academy. Give us a like, a subscribe. Throw comments in there. We put a ton of content out for years and years, and that's probably the best place to get the best value and best content from myself and my team.
Awesome. Randy, well, it has been a pleasure. This has been one of my favorite episodes, man. You really throw down the hammer when it comes to the real advice, and I love the way that you lead in not only your business, but also in your life, and the way that you pour into other people as much as you pour into yourself. So thank you again for being on the show. We appreciate you, and we will talk very soon.
Likewise, man. I wish you all the best. You're going to do great with this. Thanks.
Thank you.